So, John, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Chief. It's great to be here. Thank you.
It's definitely a conversation in the geist at the minute about where civilization's going, especially with the speed of change and where society is today. But you have got a slightly different idea, not just to discuss it, but actually to come up with a formula about how we can manage the issues that humans are going through. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah. Okay. So I think as a bit of background, I've had an interest in technology and the way the world works for a very long time. And I found myself in a position where using today's technology, instead of going back to university, I could actually do vast amounts of research and distill down some ideas that I had. And worryingly, the research showed that our civilization is on a crash course in the next 1,000 years or so. And I wondered if there was a way in which we could alter the trajectory of humanity with the tools we have today and some new ideas. And that's where the formula came from. The formula represents a blueprint, turning a philosophical solution into something a bit more credible that people can follow to help us save ourselves from ourselves and make sure humanity flourishes.
So, you think it's within our own hands to determine the future? Because obviously humans are very different to any other species. They are very much in the present. They think about immediate food, they think about shelter, sleep, obviously reproduction as well, of course. But we have the ability to look past and present, and future, of course. So, what you're trying to say is that we can see, or you can see, that civilization is going in a certain direction that you maybe don't think is right. And you've devised a way to look at things that incorporates a lot of different angles or variables that can help determine the direction that we take. Is that fair to say?
It is mostly fair. I wouldn't say that the direction is going in a way I don't think is right. I think that's quite a harsh statement that I couldn't subscribe to. I think that we are in danger of being a victim of our own success. And if we don't put in place some critical boundaries now and utilize the technologies and the creativity and the humanity we have now, I think there are certain things that could happen to us as a civilization. And those are things like, quite obviously, nuclear war or a meteor hitting the earth and wiping us out, like was associated with the dinosaurs. But the pandemic also showed us that we are susceptible to illnesses. So there's a whole variety of events and circumstances that we may or may not have control over. Now, the vast majority we do have control over. Those kind of black swan events, I call them fractures in the book, but those fractures we don't, right? But we should still be able to have a plan for how to deal with them so we don't come into them blind. Um, if you The whole idea is of the formula, and I call it the Ascension Equation. Essentially, we're either going to ascend as a civilization or we're going to decline. And that happens over such a vast amount of time. One of the biggest problems we've got is we have evolved as a species to have this ability to look back in time to understand where we are now and to look forward in time. But our lifespan is such, I think 4 years and 10, and it's increasing because the technology is getting better, but let's say we're edging towards 100 years to learn everything, to appreciate everything, to understand, to critically think, to question, to have ideas, and then to put in practice a framework for the next generation. We're really bad at that. Now, there are organizations like the Long Now or the X Prize or even the Nobel Prize that seek to get us to think longer or reward contribution. And I think that's what I'm trying to do in the book is I'm trying to get everyone to think on a much longer timeline, be the curators of the generational benefit for the next 1,000 years to ensure that we survive, that we get over the bumps in the road, and and reward individuals accordingly to do that.
I think that's true because society nowadays has a very short term view on things. There's the stag hunt thought experiment whereby you're a hunter in a forest and you understand that the stag is the best source of meat for you. It's going to give you meat for quite a while. But in order to have the stag, you need another hunter with you. The other option is just to take the rabbit. The rabbit, you only need yourself. And I think that's where society is. A lot of the times, instead of collaborating for a much bigger prize, the stag in that case, because you don't know if that person's going to actually pull through. You have to trust that person, and understand that maybe they might maybe do you over or things like that. So a lot of people go for the hare where that's only going to feed you for tonight, short term, and tomorrow you have to get the hare again, and the day after, or whether it's corporate profits. Let's just think about the bottom line rather than building cathedrals that are going to last thousands of years, or obviously the pyramids. And
Yeah, but that's a good point about cathedrals and pyramids. The people who built the foundations of those pyramids never saw the crowning moment when the limestone or the gold
that's
top of the pyramid was actually put in place. But they still saw that was the end goal. So even back in Egyptian times when those were being built, we had this idea of longevity, and I think it's concatenated more. I think people are thinking on a much shorter timeline. Exactly the reasons you're talking about, because collaboration and trust is built over time. And when you're a hunter-gatherer, your Maslow's hierarchy of needs would say that, you are looking at yourself. If you're not healthy and fed, then how can you feed the ones you love around you and your family and your children? How can you propagate and get your genes down the line? And how can you look after your elders? But there's a tribe over the river, who could help you start the farming. They've got information about agriculture that you don't know, and they're sharing information, but you don't trust them. And they're just over the river. And I think we're in a geopolitical situation. I definitely don't want to get into politics too much, but geopolitical situation where we're going back to that stage where people are now worried about their tribe on a bigger scale, but it's still their tribe. And although we are individuals, billions of amazing creativity, expertise, experience, love, everything in the world, we're still taking shortcuts and acting in groups that don't trust other groups. And there's loads of reasons for that.
It comes back to the Robber's Cave. I think it was Robber's Cave, the psychological experiment whereby they took two groups of kids. I think it was the Rattlers and the Eagles, if I remember correctly. And obviously within the teams, they were close knit, etc., etc. And they had rivalry, calling each other names. They were competing for prizes. And then subsequently, what they did is they put them in the same room together to eat together, thinking that would improve the situation, but it didn't. Actually, the proximity, but with still competitiveness between them, made the situation worse. If you've got two enemies together, they're going to fight. But what they did instead was they created a common goal, broken pipes, water pipes that affected all of them. A bus, I think, that they had to push together, and they needed each other, and that actually created friendships between the groups. They actually ended up sitting on the bus together after the experiment. And that's a really important point. What you said is that you've got tribes fighting against each other, whether it's physical tribes or political tribes or intelligence tribes. People are fighting against each other, and I think what you're saying in premise to the book is it requires society to work together in order to ascend rather than descend, as you said, across the long term, the cosmos, and whatever you want to call it, essentially.
So that idea of pulling together, yeah, you definitely need a common goal. And what I selected as an achievable goal in the next 100 to 200 years is a type 1 civilization. There's a scientist called Kardashev. He came up with this civilizational classification. So you're type 1, type 2, type 3. Type 1 is that you can sustainably harness all the power that can be possibly generated from your planet. And there's a lot of research has been done about it, and we are no way near doing that. But it's a goal. The second goal after that, type 2, is when you harness all the power from your solar system. You use a thing called a Dyson sphere, is what they're saying. That it's a huge machine you would put around our star, and you would harness all the energy from the star. And the third, on the Kardashev scale, is harnessing all the power from a galaxy, right? So it's achievable. We have it within our grasp to reach a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, harnessing all the power sustainably from our planet for the benefit of all the biodiversity that's on the planet. And I set that as a task because it's real, it's been documented, and it is achievable. And the technology we have today means that we can possibly get to that. And it's important because if we don't reach that point, if we squander our resources and the power, and if it's money and political power or corporate power and greed that drive things, then it's going to drive everything into the ground because the wastage of those resources will be insurmountable and not be able to reactivate them for the benefit of humanity. So I set that as the goal because you're exactly right. Everyone needs a goal to aim for. And if you look back through history, it's only in times of extreme trouble when this tribalistic nature has kind of fragmented and allowed people, consolidated, not fragmented, consolidated to allow larger groups of people to come together. And unfortunately, it's things like war, Europe coming together, NATO being formed. We see that now in a difficult situation geopolitically. During COVID, the world came together and shared knowledge and ideas to combat a specific problem. It's only in these times of real trouble that that we prove we can come together. Otherwise, we're reliant on, be careful what I say, potentially outdated systems of morality and education that have been brought up to us from the past that now no longer seem as relevant to us as we look towards saving ourselves from the future.
It's like they say, when situations are most difficult, civilization's built most nobly. When situations are hard and people don't like going through hard times, but actually sometimes there can be a net benefit in going through hard times or difficult situations that ends up bringing people together. If you've got a town that people don't really talk, but then someone's attacking the town, instantly people come together, and that's a really important point, really.
Jason Manford, the comedian, does a really good comedy skit about exactly this, about two guys from Manchester supporting different football teams, Liverpool, and how they just don't get on. They want to fight each other. Then they go on holiday to Spain. It's like, well, we're Brits, aren't we? We're Brits, and you're French. And then the Americans come over, well, we're European, aren't we? And it's only when aliens attack the world that the world will come together and say, yeah, we're the Earth. Off you go. So it's quite a funny skit. You should watch it.
It's like Alan Watts says. He says if aliens did come to Earth, they wouldn't be able to determine the difference between any human's race or whatever. It's like if you go to a different country, people can look the same until you're there for a while and you start to differentiate faces. So although we can differentiate things very easily, it's just because we have been around for a long time. If someone just came in, they wouldn't know the difference between all dogs. All dogs would probably look very similar to them because they haven't got enough differentiation to be able to determine who's who. And that's what we do to ourselves. We say, oh, well, I'm Asian, I'm 5'10" or whatever. I support this football team, I'm English. And we give ourselves so many different categories, and it's actually a way to divide each other rather than bring each other together. Fundamentally, we are all human. We all want the best for civilization. I think if you start with that premise, the world will be a better place.
Yeah, I would put an argument to that as well and say that people like their individuality, and the rise of social media, which obviously we're partaking in, and access to information means that people can categorize themselves very differently. Yes, I do. I was diagnosed with ADHD 5 years ago. It runs as a trait in my family. We have now realized that's probably why the book was written and collecting all these things together. But, the rise of ADHD, people want a bit, right, I now have ADHD. That's me. I'm going to define myself by that, which you shouldn't do. It's just, or autism or sexual preference or geography. I mean, there's so many different things. It could be freckled people or ginger or blonde hair. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. People like to be an individual. And this whole idea of collectivism is quite alien to people because we live so much in ourselves and have that outlook of just ourselves. When I was driving down in the car, I was thinking how best I could express this way that we should be collective and how individuals can be part of a system that can work together, that didn't sound communistic or like a dictate from communism. And I was thinking, we're on this spaceship Earth. That's a term that's been coined a lot by different people. It's just a system. We are hurtling through the universe. We're an enclosed system that can sustain life. And we don't know if this is going to hit, we might get hit by a meteor or we might veer towards a black hole, whatever it might be. And I thought, well, there must be an easy way to think about it, especially with the formula in the book, the equation, it's like the Titanic. Every element of the equation is like you've got the engine, you've got the leadership, you've got the direction, but you didn't see the iceberg coming. And it's the same as a human body. And this is the first time I'm trying out this analogy, so please bear with me. We're a collection of trillions of cells, but we've still got governance and morality and creativity. We've still got the ability to break our arm, but then have to recover from that. We've still got the ability to interact with other people. Everything is a system, whether you look for very large to the microscopic quantum world. Everything is a system, and we work well as a system because we've evolved like that. Now we consciously have to evolve to be part of the system that can then go on to save humanity. And I think that's really what the book's about, is allowing ourselves to understand that we're part of a bigger system that has a much longer timeline.
Because the equation itself has got a number of different sort of variables or letters that you've put them as. And the first one is technology, isn't it, if I'm not mistaken? So can you speak to how technology forms part of this ascension of humanity, and how if we get it wrong, it could be dire and detrimental to humanity, or if we do get it right, what the future could hold for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's be really clear. This isn't an E equals MC squared or a Drake equation. This is a philosophical thought experiment made real with systems thinking. So on the left-hand side of the equation, you have the rate of change of civilization. And that's either going to be positive change or negative change. And then that would be equal to TAMSC, which is the top line, divided by E and F, and then the multipliers are G and D. And I'll go through all of those. But technology being the first one, yeah, so my background is 30 years in emerging technology. So I know technology has an impact on the world ethically, morally, commercially quite well. And it's really what started me thinking, because I've been working in AI for over 20 years, in generative for nearly 9 years, and quantum computing for 4 years. And most people are only hearing about quantum computing now, and no one saw generative AI, ChatGPT, and the like come, 2 years ago. Nobody was even thinking about that, but I was kind of working on it. And that I've really had a privileged career in that respect. So, yeah, in terms of technology, you think about the power technology has when used correctly and when not used correctly. So we've got these incredible advancements, the ability to write the book. I would not have been able to go to university and learn all the subjects I needed to learn if it wasn't without the research tools I have available. How quickly in COVID we could come up with the medicines necessary to help us. The forthcoming robotic revolution, twinned with quantum computers, twinned with generative or AGI, or artificial general intelligence. That'll be a big thing soon. What do we do with these autonomous robots who make decisions for themselves and have moral questions themselves? How do we deal with that? So technology, the top line of the equation, the TAMSC, is the engine that drives our future. Right? It's the engine that drives our future, and every element of it is a contributor to that. Below that, the denominators are existential crisis. So things like COVID, things like runaway AI, things like drones attacking people who are trying to fly them. Those kind of things we have control over. Earthquakes, maybe. And fractures is the F. And fractures are things that we have no control over. So whether a meteorite is coming towards us that we are not going to be able to stop, whether we do sail too close to a black hole. And I even mention, because I do have quite a sci-fi head on me, I even mention what happens when aliens land, if aliens land, the probabilities involved with that. Because even if the listeners are thinking that it's unlikely or never going to happen, we should still be prepared for it, because we don't want to be caught cold and reactionary. As we see in all the movies, they get the guns and the tanks out, and actually we want to have a plan of what to do. And there are plans in place, I'm sure the governments have. And then the last far right of the equation is the multipliers. So do we have governance in place to be able to do this? Is the G. And D, I think, is the most important. As a collective civilization, do we have a desire to save ourselves from ourselves? So yeah, so T is the first one of this engine that's driving our civilization. Technology is fantastic, but it's also terrible. We've made someone the richest person on the planet who will never need as much money as Mr. Musk has. No one needs that amount of money. Yet we've set up society so that this guy has benefited from creating this technology that everyone wants, to create a single person with more wealth combined than the vast majority of the world, even some nations. Is that right?
It's the economic side, isn't it? But in terms of the value that he's provided, that's why, obviously, in a capitalist society, that's why he's worth that much, whether it's the company value or the income streams, the capital value, etc. But I think with technology, especially AI and ChatGPT, etc., that people have access to open source. The problem is, as you rightly said, is if you've got AI that is self-governing, the whole paperclip maximizer is that if you ask AI to or artificial intelligence to create as many paperclips as possible, it depends what parameters you put in. Because if you say create as many as possible, first it will just make as many paperclips as possible and optimize the warehouses, etc. Then it will start melting other metal, and it will basically destroy things in order to make it. So the net benefit is not a positive one, of course. And this is the question: is if you are creating AI, how do you create the rules that are going to ensure that decisions are made correctly? Because we don't really know. We actually can't make systems that are sustainable to an extent. You know, we have waste that goes into landfill, whereas nature is quite perfect. You know, the animals defecate, and that is now, you know, soil or
Mm.
food for the soil. Nature has a very good, perfect system in that way. We've struggled to do that, and I think even with AI, we tend to. It's like a Mara's law, I think it is. We underestimate the effects of technology short term, but overestimate it long term, or the other way around. And I think that's the case here. Is that AI is not always necessarily going to be beneficial, and as you rightly said earlier, who gets their hands on it? Who gets how do people use it? Because generally, if people are at the top, they can use it much more powerfully than we can, and I think that's a real issue.
It's quite interesting that you segued into that, because the next letter in the equation is A, and that's access. And access means access not just to education and tools, but access to the digital economy. You know, I think it's a third of the world still isn't on the internet, right? So how can we progress as a civilization if we're leaving people behind? We can't. Everyone has to rise together. So from a technical point of view, yeah, absolutely, these tools are incredible. And I might say something quite contentious now, right? If you look at quantum computing, and something I'm working in that quite heavily at the moment, and there is a race to 2030, 2035, I'm going to suggest, where fault-tolerant quantum computing is going to be available. Now, what that means is that for the last 20 years, they've been trying to do quantum computing. There are 8 different types of quantum computer or modalities, and one of them is going to win. Um, Governments have been investing in a bank of quantum computers because they don't know which one's going to win. So I think Rishi Sunak gave the UK government 2.4 billion to buy these computers so that we can get the skills, the learning, and the understanding, and one of them might win.
Bet on all the horses.
Yeah, bet on all exactly that. Bet on all the horses, which costs us quite a lot of money. But the corollary to that is that if we didn't do that and there is a winner, then we as a nation, and I know I'm speaking holistically about humanity, but I'm just going to take it back to nation states now. We as a nation would lose out. Government's putting so much money into this because if they do win, the advantage is vast. And there's a line in the sand called post-quantum cryptography. And what that means is that conventional cryptography, security, banks, military, governments can be broken by a quantum computer. They're very good at breaking things like that, or they're meant to be. So between 2030, 2035, which is imminent, I mean, it's months to 2030 rather than years, let's say, you know, the country that can break quantum cryptography, how much power does that give them? And then it leads me, and this again, this is my own thought, my own opinion. Please, it's not centered in fact. It's a bit dystopian. But is it possible that someone could have a quantum computer now that they haven't disclosed to the world that actually can do that, and they may be holding the world to ransom in a geopolitical power struggle and getting away with absolute murder, literally, to get what they want by holding the country to ransom because they have a technology that isn't that too far out the realms of possibility, in my view.
Just using those two together, technology and accessibility, it could come a point where it's literally AI wars. Okay, I'm pitting my AI against your AI, and that's what it could be. China's AI versus British AI.
What they're doing with robots at
Yeah,
the moment,
drones and
literally.
stuff, literally. It's crazy. So what's your view on that? Does that come again back to the fact that we should be working together and maybe coming back to further parts of your equation?
Yeah, but and that leads very nicely, as if it was almost perfectly aligned to the M, which is like morality. TAMSC, morality. You know, just because we have technology, or just because we think we can achieve that technology, should we? Is it necessary for the survival of our species, or is it a nice to have? Now, people always do. People always climb Everest because it's there. People always try and get that quantum computer working because it's there. But should we? The morality aspect of the book is it delves into exactly that. You know, why are we having wars? Let's get to the crux of that. We're getting wars because of power, because of greed, because of religious beliefs, that indoctrination, ideology. In my view, and I know I'm a bit utopian in my thinking, but we should be past all that. We should be past that necessity for wars. We should be communicating. We should morally be following a code that is beneficial for humanity. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse at the moment, rather than better the better, which is, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to research all that and put it in the book under the M variable.
So on the M variable then, are you more on the sort of deontology side or utilitarianism? So deontology, for those who don't know, is you base morality on the action itself. Whereas utilitarianism is it's based on the result. So I don't know if you've heard of the trolley car problem, for example.
I have.
Yeah, so the trolley car problem would be an example of utilitarianism, where it's better to kill the one and save the four. So how would you define morality in that respect?
That's a big question, isn't it? So again, to be clear, I'm not an expert on every single subject matter in the book. What I've done is collectively brought it all together into something that's readable and accessible on an intellectual basis, but also as an accessible as an interest basis. So when it comes to morality, we've grown up looking at the past on a variety of religious upbringings. Basically, that's our tenet for morality. A lot of people say, I'm atheist, right? So I don't believe in religion for the texts in which they're based on the creators that perhaps people believe have created the world. I've got my own view of that. But where was I going? I was going with that we built a stable of morality based on things like the Ten Commandments, Torah, Quran, all those kind of things. But those are outdated, right? And people adhere to this very strict scripture to the absolute letter of word of the word of God, which is so powerful, because if you've got the Almighty on your side, then you can do no wrong. But somehow we need to communicate the fact that yes, there is room for God in people's lives if that's what you want. But morality and humanity isn't based on religion. I know, being an atheist, people might say, well, where'd you get your moral compass from? Well, I know what's right and wrong. I'm fairly well read. I'm fairly well educated. I have experience of life. I know where my morals are. So it's a really difficult thing to say. As far as the trolley problem goes, I'd be pulling the switch.
Okay, here's a good question then for you. So there's called the Fat Man variant, if you've heard of it.
I haven't, so I'm excited.
Yeah, so and this is where things get complicated. So obviously the trolley car problem, let's just explain it very quickly. So you've got a track with one person and the train's heading towards towards four people, and you can pull the switch so it diverts and hits one person. The question is, would you do it? Because the net benefit is three extra people. The Fat Man problem is same example, but instead you push. So imagine a fat man on the. So there's four people on the track, and it's just a single track with the train. And there's a fat man stood on the bridge above. You know how you get the bridges above the train. The question is, would you push the man off to stop the train in order to save the four? Because it's the same thing, isn't it? 1 versus 4. What determines the difference? Is it the fact that you're pushing the man and actually? What's the difference between pushing the man and pressing the button? It's the same thing, isn't it?
I'd look pretty heavy guy to stop that train. I get that. And okay, I don't want to answer that in the way you want me to. I want to answer that I want to solve the problem before it happens. I want to put everything in place with the technology we have so that the trolley car problem doesn't happen. By the way, I think it was either this week or last week they came out and said that AI had said that the absolute solution was you pull the lever.
Yes, utilitarianism is based on the result.
So that's the problem with AI, right? Yeah. Because AI is constantly learning off itself. That's one of the problems we have with it at the moment.
But it could be anything. So again, let's use a self-driving car. It's saying 4 people are in the car, and let's say 4, and let's kill this child. But then how do you then put that in about the age and the future? And I think that's a difficult.
I was in a meeting 15 years ago with a very large computer organization and a very large automotive manufacturer. And we had exactly that conversation. This was 15 years ago, because they need to code that into their autonomous driving cars. Do we save the grandparents, just the 2 people driving their car, or the parents with their 3 young children? And they made a decision on that. And that's what is in, or I believe that is part of the autonomous programming, or that was discussed when I was in that meeting 15 years ago.
I don't think you can ever get enough information though, because what influence have they had on society? Are these guys bumps? It's not just age, it's impact. How big is their family? How dependent are them children on their parents, etc., etc., etc. Relative relations. What projects are they working on that would stop? So I think there's a lot more to it. And even to use another example, the Heinz dilemma is, if your mother was or son was sick and it needed this medicine that you couldn't afford, would you steal the medicine? Now that comes back to like a math equation, isn't it? Is stealing less bad than saving someone's life? And all of these thought experiments or ways to look at things give us some ideas as to what morality actually is. But putting that into something like an AI and giving it the tools to be able to make those decisions is shit in, shit out, isn't it? What are you putting in for morality? Because I think that's one of the most important parts of society in general, even the equation and everything.
Yeah.
It's morality.
So in the book, at the end of each, so I go through the equation in its entirety. Then there's a chapter for each of the variables, explaining it in depth. Then the end of a chapter, there is a case study, if you like, of what might happen. And one of them's called the Althea Project. Exactly this. It's the morality. It was the it. And remember, this is it's a bit sci-fi, but it's just a case study to kind of highlight where that variable fits. And in this Althea Project, they got a quantum-powered AGI set of humanoid robots to curate the Amazon. And what they did in the story was that they moved an indigenous population away from a danger zone, and some of those people died out because they didn't have access to things they need, all the knowledge they needed at the time wasn't present. But for Althea, the humanoid robot, it was the right thing to do because it was optimized on the rainforest. It was optimized on the wrong thing. So there's then set up the synthetic judiciary. It's only one page of this, but it's quite a good story. The synthetic judiciary, which brought the world together to understand the morality, was a very big piece of this. And they had to somehow find the moral compass for the technology, but also humanity, to point in the right direction for this civilizational change. So we ascend rather than descend. So yeah, so it's some quite nice stories in the back of each chapter.
But even morality for AI, just coming back to the first one, the Rocco's basilisk. So let's say, for example, you used to bully someone at school, and they became the CEO of the company you worked for, and they sacked you because retrospectively your behavior was terrible. AI could do that morally when it gets to, or if it gets to artificial general intelligence. It could say, okay, who helped create me? Who didn't? And from them, they are saying, morally, you didn't help me to do this. So I think even morality can be cross-referenced to other parts of technology, etc. So it all sort of intermingles into one. I
But that's why you should always say please and thank you when you're asking ChatGPT something, because at the end of the day, it'll be like, oh, at least it said thank you. But and do you know it costs actually a bottle of water each time someone says please and thank you when they're putting a ChatGPT prompt in? A bottle of water in terms of the energy
that's
to
what.
actually process that. So actually, God, I forgot his name. What's OpenAI's name?
Sam Altman.
Sam Altman. He came out and said, please stop using please and thank you. Does that mean we're going to get out of that process purely to say, I mean, it's a very interesting dynamic, that whole thing. You want to be polite with an AI that doesn't have general intelligence. It's just a decision engine, if you like. I mean, I know quite a lot about AI, but I'm making that very, very simple. And then it's affecting our morality because perhaps we unlearn how to say please and thank you, and that transfers into everyday life.
But then do you give AI like human level help, or it's like, you get the GMB and human rights for work conditions, etc.
Yeah.
Do you then have to give it that and say, look, you can't do these tasks, you have to be kind to it? But then is that sort of creating anthropomorphic sort of characteristics for essentially something that is non-human?
But don't you think that's what they want to do?
Yeah.
Do you think that's what they're doing? Humanoids, I mean, we call them robots or androids, but they're humanoids in the shape of humans. We, the creators, have made them in our own image. Never heard that anywhere before. Have made them in our own image, and we're going to give them intelligence that they've learned from us, and they move like us. Well, not like me, because someone could do backflips and things now, right? So
maybe 5 years ago.
25 years ago. So we're making them in our own image. We're giving them all our information. And should we? I think if you look back at it was Boston Dynamics, isn't it? Who came up with the robot dog.
Oh yeah.
And it was so alien to us. It wasn't real. It was a very utilitarian tool that could go and defuse bombs or open doors or do weird dances. By making something feel more human, is it going to be more accepted as a humanoid robot? Are people going to allow them into their homes? Will we be able to trust them more? There's a lot of work on facial expressions because we communicate not just verbally, can't even speak verbally. We communicate verbally, we communicate with our faces, we communicate with our actions, we communicate pheromonically with our smells, which people don't really take into account. Someone taught me that years ago. Are we going to do the same with this humanoid robot? Yes, because they're doing so much research into facial expressions now to make them feel more human, so they're more accepted. Why? Because every household might have a $25,000 humanoid robot to do its cooking, cleaning, and beckoning maybe in the future. That's what the commercial end goal is of that.
We've already got parts of that with the remote Hoovers and Alexa, and it's just going to take a merging of some of those more early stage designs to be, as you said, in maybe 10 years, where you've got a robot around the house, like some sort of butler, that's doing all of the shit you don't want to do. And
I don't think it's 10 years.
do you not think it's 10
No,
years?
not at all. I think you can buy one now. I specifically said 25 grand because I think that's how much the charge is. You can buy one now. It's early doors, but there'll be early adopters. Think of all the people who bought the Apple
Yeah.
virtual things that are now defunct. But yeah, you're right.
I think it's a dangerous game, though.
As dangerous is, again, in the news today, quite up to date, is looking at the future of relationships, AI-based relationships, and how people are confiding in. And porn aside, that's one completely different area that basically built the internet. But people are always going to be interested in those kind of things. But I know people who are asking for relationship advice, who are asking for consulting advice. With my ADHD, I've asked for, how do I approach this problem? How can I better partition my time? I sometimes get a lot of my big ones, imposter syndrome. How do I get out of imposter syndrome? And so I often ask that. But also dealing with family members. This is a situation. How do I help them understand this particular thing? Now, that's in the realms of manipulation. If it's about money or wills or houses, you're asking an AI to come back with advice that's not accredited. It hasn't got that human touch, hasn't got that bedside manner. Well, now it does have the bedside manner. It is a frightening scene, which is why governance in the book is so important. Ethical governance across all of this. Just because we can do it, should we? The more human we make this technology, the easier to use it we make, the more it's going to be adopted. And there will always be nefarious actors who will use it for the wrong kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying telemarketers are nefarious actors. It's a great job. I did it for a long time. I got a call in the car on the way down here that took me a while to realize it was AI. There was artificial noise in the background, as though they were in an office. There were telephones ringing. It was all manufactured. I listened to it for a while. I put up some really forceful, negative arguments about why I didn't want to call, and can you check them on the list, and what AI are you? And it came back and just completely human in its responses.
It's scary, because I think there's a time now where we can slightly tell the difference between videos and conversations, but this is early stage. There's going to come a time where we can't tell the difference, and I think when that happens, the internet will die, because if you want information, you can't tell if it's a real source or not, it's a real video. If Donald Trump really did this, or this person really did that,
I cannot speak about him.
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. So it's not about who says it. It's about the authenticity of the source and if it really happened. And when we can no longer distinguish whether it is fake or real, I think that's going to be a really bad place to be.
So that's trust in our media and reporting agencies, isn't it? And unfortunately, even the BBC, just before Christmas, let me down, because I've always seen them as a source of truth. I generally look at Al Jazeera, France 24,
R2.
Yes, no, not so much. And BBC are the three I go to, and try and get a holistic view. But I did rely on the BBC, and they really let me down with that. I think it was a really bad mistake by the Panorama team.
British Brainwashing Corporation, is it? So.
Okay, well, perhaps I'm one of those
So, yeah.
brainwashed people.
So what about creativity then? Because you mentioned the robots, okay, and using AI for things, whether it's asking about imposter syndrome or relationship advice. Does the use of technology, the increased use of technology, reduce creativity?
So creativity is one of the variables in the book. So we'll always reference the beauty. If I humbly say this, the beauty of the equation is it's like a matrix. It all is interdependent on other things. So technology is very prevalent. So we'll always go back to technology, but we also should look at morality and ethics and all these kind of things. But creativity is a big pet love of mine, because I don't think we're taught creativity in schools. I think it's taught out of us. Ken Robinson, if you've seen that TED talk, talks about creativity. He tells a wonderful story about a girl who wasn't succeeding at school, and they took her to somewhere to have her assessed, because that's obviously there's something wrong if you don't fit into a normal schooling system. That blows my mind. It's so annoying, having been through it myself. And she's sitting there fiddling away, and the guy walks the mother out of the room, and he puts some music on. He walks out of the room, and she gets up and she dances, and just because she was fidgeting the whole time. He said, "There's nothing wrong with your daughter. She's a dancer. She's a dancer." I think it's the most. I love that video by again, and I think it's educated out of us because the education system wants workers, so they want to educate workers. That's going away. I've got 3 sons, just out of one out of university, 2 out of university, one's a sportsman, one's traveling. But, what I'm saying to them is that the 75% of jobs that you expect to be there are not gonna be there. They'll have different titles. Maybe only 85% are not gonna be there. So what are you gonna work in? And the answer is always, "I don't know," and they shouldn't know right now. But I need to teach them, or I've hopefully taught them creativity, entrepreneurship, being able to be self-starters, change agents, and understand technology, in particular data. So if you know those 4 things, essentially you're a consultant. But if you know those 4 things and can leverage them correctly, then you can lend yourself to anything. But going back to the creativity piece, yeah, it's educated out of those kids who are just playing with Lego on the floor and just so lost and absorbed in that, or drawing, or the kids who love reading, or the kids who love to solve puzzle or maths problems. Yeah, let let's let's let them go down that route for as long as possible, rather than constraining them and saying, "No, we've got these examinations you have to do, and this is the curriculum we have to do." Even at A levels, even at university, it's still you're constrained. You're meant to read round a subject, but even so, my own experience was you're quite constrained. So we need to teach creativity and play. You saw you may have seen over COVID, there was a massive spike in people buying coloring books and coloring pencils, adult coloring books, because one, there was not a lot to do because they were holed up. Two, because people want to be creative. They need a creative outlet. So I'm all for creative clubs, and I talk about this. So teaching creativity, having creative get-togethers. No idea is a bad idea unless it's proven to be one. So everyone should have the opportunity to stand up and just say the most outlandish things, creative-wise, and I just think great things will come of it. People are too constrained by money, commercial terms in industry to be creative. They say that this is my own experience in a very large company. I invented a sports drink years ago, wrote a couple of books about that, did okay out of it, and was brought in because of my technical background, because my degree was in computer science. I was brought into this very large American technology company to be entrepreneurial with a particular area. And they thought they wanted someone entrepreneurial and creative. They wanted someone with outlandish ideas. They didn't. They just wanted to hone them down. That's not what we do. So they constrain themselves the whole time. They put parameters around it. I just think creativity, we need to be more creative and find outlets.
100%. And I've got a big problem with how school is taught. One is it's basically rote learning, not questioning authority. If you team up with other people, it's classed as cheating. But in reality, in the real world, you have to speak to each other and work together. So I think it's very individualistic in that respect, where, yeah, don't question authority, listen to exactly what we say, don't work with each other. And I think that has a big impact on your ability to be creative, of course. And, I was kicked out of school, I was expelled. And it wasn't because I was stupid, it was because I was naughty. I was clever, I'm an inventor. And it, as you said, it didn't fit my way of learning. Maybe I was ADHD, I don't know. I've been told maybe I am. But the way that the structure is, it doesn't suit everyone. It's like you said about the dancer. I think that is something that does take away creativity. I quite like the Montessori school
Yeah.
setup, where they're left onto their own device, and whatever they find interesting, they will learn more of. If you're, I mean, you sound like you're like me. You've got a lot of interest, and you'll read up on a lot of things, but you only want to get better because you're interested in it rather. If you're not interested in something, it's a waste of your time to. Okay, there is a base level you need to know about maths and English. There has to be, but then after that, it should be, I think, trying to find the genius within someone, because everyone is a genius in their own right. Fish trying to climb a tree, that whole analogy. So I think that creativity everyone has, and it's trying to find out exactly what it is. Because if you look at a child, you can work out sometimes what genius they're going to have, whether it's sports. They don't get trained to be fast or whatever. They have it
Well, they
naturally.
do train to
But
get far. You can
you
train
can
to
get
get
faster. You can get faster. But for example, my brother, he was the fastest 100-meter sprinter in Leicestershire, and he just was naturally fast at running from a young age. You have natural gifts. You can hone your gifts. I'm not saying, I'm massive into self-improvement, but I could train every day and I will never be as fast as Usain Bolt, because he has a natural frame and his leg span and fast twitch.
He has
I
advantages. He has
of course.
physiological advantages.
So that's a gift and things like that. But I have other things that he doesn't have. So I think it's trying to find where your creativity
in that gift and nurturing the gift for the
That's it.
benefit, not just of the child, but of the future. And I think that's where this creativity and culture piece comes in. I speak a lot about critical thinking. I don't think people question enough. I think I touched on it earlier. You know, we there's this book by Dr. Robert Cialdini we were speaking about earlier, The Six Influences, and it's about taking shortcuts, because not that we're lazy people generally, but we like to take shortcuts. The like button on the Facebook page is exactly that. It's a shortcut. If you've got more likes, oh, someone's liked it. It must be interesting. If they've got a lot more views on Insta, then, oh, it must be interesting. So that's how the old influencer thing works. We look to authority. We look for these shortcuts. And that came about when we were the hunter-gatherers again. If someone knew how to go out and where the hunting ground was and to find their way back, well, you'd follow them because you knew they could do it. You wouldn't go off by yourself because there's danger involved. But when we have religious leaders, politicians, military police personnel, teachers, and so on, we are taught to look for those shortcuts. Don't worry, we've done all the work. This is what you need to know. I think we need to get away from that and teach critical thinking. You're right. There is a baseline, because without a baseline of learning and understanding the fundamentals, you can't grow on that baseline. But critical thinking and questioning, and no question that you're asking is a dumb question. I think that needs to be like from the earliest possible moment in a child's schooling, because everyone should have the right to question. And unfortunately, that is, again, I didn't speak about politics. We said we weren't going to do that, but that's been taken away worldwide now. You cannot, freedom of speech and all that.
Yeah, freedom of speech is in a bad place. Social media or even in person. And yeah, I think that the way that the world is going, unfortunately, it's going to be harder and harder to voice an opinion that might actually be correct. It's the whole Aberline paradox, but in a global scale, which is where, like a boardroom, for example, everyone agrees to do the thing. So let's say a CEO says, let's expand and let's go into this premise. No one actually wants to do it, but they all agree. And you end up doing things that no one actually wants to do because it's one person says to do it, and we all end up doing it. And I think that's the case with the speech.
But why do they want to do it? Because the leader is, because you've reached the place you want to be, whether it's in government or a company, by being in line with leadership values and ideologies. And you don't want to upset that because you still want the next step and still want the next step. So you frame so the central power structure is so tightly ingrained that there is no change, and everyone believes that they're doing the right thing. You saw it in Nazi Germany. You saw it in Vietnam. Horrendous pictures. You see it in most wars, actually, but you're seeing it in American politics today, where you can't believe some of the things that the tier behind the current president are saying. Again, slipped into politics, didn't mean to.
So what about the existential crisis then? Because I think that's the next letter in your equation. What are the threats? What are these crises that could happen that are going to impact humans potentially? Because there has been things in the past that have caused issues. So what do you think those issues are today?
Yeah. So it's really interesting, because people are very speculative, very dystopian about this kind of existential crisis. These are things that we have in our control to stop before they happen. That's the difference between that and fractures. So was it Prince Charles, before he was king, always talked about nanotechnology and the grey goop, that we were going to be in a layer of grey goop up to our knees or hips, 2 foot, 3 foot, whatever it was, because it would just propagate out there and AI would just self-replicate and we'd be in this grey goo. It hasn't happened yet. Could it happen? Maybe, if AI decides it's going to build nanotechnology and with a disease, and it might. Anyway, there's, again, it can get quite sci-fi rather than sci-fact very quickly. So, we are very aware of runaway AI. I think one of the grandfather of AI, I can't remember his name, said there's a 10 to 15% chance that humanity will die out because of runaway AI, AGI. And AGI and AI are different. AI is kind of under control. It's not to some degree sentient, nor is AGI, but it's artificial general intelligence. It's a step towards sentience and understanding a place in world of an AI and its ability to infer and take more moral decisions itself, right? So AGI really isn't far away. I wrote the book last year, and I said between 2025 and 27, and we're halfway between that now. So when AGI becomes real. just because we can. Should we? No, but that never stopped anyone doing these things with technology. So that's the second one, is something like AI. Bioterrorism is another massive one. Who isn't going to, biohacking. Yeah, there are clubs you can go and use CRISPR, which is a gene sequencing technology, to go and biohack and make luminous ears on the back of mouses, that kind of stuff. There are limitations, obviously, but, you could probably get the technology and know how you need to do that to make all sorts of dangerous concoctions that might be unleashed on the world. And then there's the fact that the wrong bat might bite the wrong pig, and a new organism is formed as well. And that happens in things like Ebola. I've watched too many movies about that. So these existential crises we know are coming. They probably come before. I remember a friend of mine said to me, "Cool, can you believe that, COVID, who would have thought in our lifetime COVID would come?" And I said, "Look, it happens every 80 to 100 years. Spanish flu was the last one,
Yeah.
1916. So we were overdue for it. It's going to happen again." And that takes us back to this lifetime experience thing. We don't think long enough. We don't look back. We don't exist long enough to believe that these things are going to happen to us. And even if they don't, they are going to happen again to future generations. So let's put the things in place now that mitigate that, and that we can at least cope with them.
I think it's the whole button at the end, the world experiment kind of thing, where imagine you can press this red button and everything in your life comes true. Everything you ever want comes true. But there's a 1% chance or a 0.5% chance or whatever the number is, but very low percentage, that the world would end. And I think we're doing that in a lot of respect with AI. That could end the world. Nuclear weapons could end the world, etc., etc. And I think we're taking a big risk. Hadron Collider, for example, that could cause some sort of massive nuclear or physical issue that universe implodes on itself or whatever.
This iteration won't, but they're building the bigger one.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a bigger one as well.
But I mean, at every point now, it's the button on the end of the world, because you're going to build it. That could cause the issue and then use it. So I think we're in that situation now because we've got so much power as a species with the gene editing, as you mentioned, with CRISPR, which we don't always understand the impacts of doing things, I don't think, as humans. We try to work it out, but we don't always work it out correctly, and bad things can happen off the back of it. And I think that's the problem we've got now, is we've got so much power that we can cause massive change that we aren't really taking into account the long-term impacts, and we can't know all of the long-term impacts. Yes, we can theorize and philosophize about it and maybe think about the potential. If you think of like a decision tree, this happens, this happens, this happens, but maybe we're using the wrong models.
But of course we are, because we're an incredibly intelligent brain, far superior than we were designed to be, in a body that was designed as hunter-gatherers. So we've got this incredible technology capability housed in something that has these very basal primal instincts, the instinct for success, or the instinct to lead, the instinct to feed ourselves, the instinct to look after those around us. But unfortunately, again, tribalistic, I think that those people around us is such a small, in the great scheme of things, it's such a small group of people. And we need to think a lot further outside that, a lot wider. So yeah, I think, I referenced the Long Now Foundation. The Long Now Foundation did a thought experiment about 10,000, the 10,000 year clock. You've got the doomsday clock. You've got people trying to look at that generational change. But just because it hasn't happened to us doesn't mean we should put in place a framework to sort it out now. There's meant to be an ethics committee made up of the Mag 7, like NVIDIA, IBM, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and that lot, that's in place to decide the rules. You asked before, who decides the rules around ethics of AI? They're the people who are meant to decide it, but they're the most successful companies in the world. Do we trust them to do that? Should it be a group of technologists? Should it be a group of citizens? Should it be a group of nations that, in a tripartite way, make a decision collectively for the benefit of mankind? Very hard to do, but that would be a solution. I actually go into that in a bit.
It's the whole Plato's philosopher king, isn't it? That he thinks that the most wise person should make the rules, that doesn't have any skin in the game. But unfortunately, the way that society's set up now is those that have the skin in the game have the benefit of the rules that they're making.
Yeah. But that's a capitalist society, isn't it? And it's winning because money is power. I think that in terms of of runaway AI, we know that we know that that's a possibility. We have to put something in place. In terms of bioterrorism, I think it's too late. The information required to do this stuff is already out there. So it's not a question of limiting the information. It's a question of finding where that's likely, predicting where that's likely to happen and putting a stop to it, not militarily, but some other way. I'm quite a pacifist in my utopian world in my head. And I think communication and discourse is the way to solve problems. Military is so unnecessary nowadays, but they seem to want to do it out the whole time. So we need to find creative solutions to offset the problems that are going to happen. I mean, people talk about water wars. There is a water problem in the world right now that isn't getting talked about. There's a birth rate problem as well. Well, it's not really a problem because the world is resetting itself. We are too many people for the planet we live on at the moment. But we shouldn't do, because there's plenty for everybody. But the way in which we abuse it means that there has to be a reset. So there are these problems that we're not talking about because the news garners the massive headlines and the biggest problems, rather than solving those individual problems that a lot of people are working on. But these existential crises are going to happen. So why wouldn't we educate, get people to think about it, communicate, and solve it as a humanity, rather than wait for it to happen and panic like we did in COVID?
So what about fractures? What's the difference between the existential side and maybe the fracture side?
Yeah, so I really deliberated long and hard about this in the equation. I was going to put them both into one. And I decided that the existential ones we have control over, and fractures we have no control over. So they will happen. So a meteorite has hit the Earth before. You could argue that we have control over that, and that's why we're doing manned probes to Mars and possibly human missions to manned missions to Mars and so on, trying to escape the planet. But, if that one does hit, then, that's the end. But can we mitigate about that? No. But can we mitigate a smaller one hitting, like at Tunguska in Russia, where that's the biggest one in our lifetime that's ever hit? If it did wipe out Paris, for example, I love France, by the way, I don't know why I picked Paris, but if it did hit Paris, what do we do with displaced people? What would happen to them? Has anyone thought about that? It does get a little bit apocalyptic, I do love the 28 days, 28 months, 28 years later franchise, but I know that in the States they have a playbook. What if there is a disease that turns people into, I'm not going to say the Z word, but into raging, hungry groups? What do we do about that? Where would we go? And they're building seed bunkers in Norway that, in case if the world does burn, if there's a plasma jet from a solar flare that just wipes out like an EMP or technology, or burns us, fries us all, are those seeds going to be safe? Can it propagate life again? They're thinking long term. So those fractures are things that we really have no control over. And I mentioned it before that, whether alien life exists or not in whatever form, let's just have a playbook in case someone does land. It doesn't involve them landing in the United States and speaking to the head of that country. Let's have proper representation.
I think the Fermi paradox is the answer to the alien thing, is that, okay, with all of the millions of galaxies out there, etc., why can we not see anyone? And it's either they don't want to be seen, or the more pertinent question possibly is that, or point is that possibly there are societies out there, but they've never got to the point of society that they are able to travel, interstellar travel. So there might be loads, but they die out, and only maybe humans have got to that point where we are.
Or we've missed them.
Or we've missed them.
Or they were there before us and they've died out, because all civilizations rise and fall. So I think, in my reading, I think there is a more than 50% chance there is microbiological life elsewhere in the universe. And the idea, so I defend the paradox Drake equation, similar to Jonathan.
Yeah.
So I think that, I think that there is a possibility, but exactly that either they've been before us, technologically advanced, or they were behind us, or they're on their way to us and we'll die out before they get to us. We haven't got the technology. This is why type 1, type 2 civilization is so enticing, because once you get to that point, you have the power to spread a message far and wide. So yeah, we're getting to the realms of sci-fi there, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think we talked about critical thinking and asking all the questions. We should be asking questions like, what else have we missed? Is it possible that the physics finds out the wormholes are possible and we can drive, go to the other side of the universe, it's the other side of the galaxy, and there are things. If there are 200 billion stars and a percentage of them has planets around it, then Drake says there's a likelihood there is a life form there that could receive that message. But it's sci-fi at the moment. But my work in quantum computing blows my mind every day. It's not really what everyone thinks, but the tolerances in which we work at, the physics involved, it's just mind-blowing what they're doing. Entanglement is a real thing, spooky action at a distance, as Einstein said.
Slit experiments as well and all of that.
Passing through solid, particles passing through solid walls, double slit, all that kind of stuff. I'm no expert. I'm a pop physicist, if anything.
That stuff baffles me though, like the particle slit experiment, entanglement experiments, Schrodinger's box, etc., Schrodinger's cat or whatever it's called. All of those things are just baffling, and for me it suggests that the universe is aware that it's being observed, especially with the particle slit experiment. Because even did the delayed choice experiment as well, didn't they? I think, which is part of the particle slit experiment. So so they basically move the measuring device on the wall as opposed to being at the slit. I mean, I'm not, like you said, I'm a pop version, so it's probably not best for me to explain a bit. Check it out because it's really interesting. But I think that we don't understand that, and I think that's I think the interesting part actually is that when you look at cells at different levels, there's a point where, okay, we know that particles behave in this particular way. At what point does it start becoming, for example, within humans, a sentient being? And it's like the whole Sowright's paradox. At what point is a grain of sand a mound of sand? Like, is it 1,001, 2,000, a million? There's a point in time where the cells change behavior to obviously, solid objects, etc. So I find that really sort of interesting and strange.
So, the passion I put behind the book is very credible, and it's based a lot in science, right? 95% is scientific facts. There are some pretty out there ideas in there. One of the ideas I didn't put in there was the idea of simulation, which you're going to be interested in.
Simulation theory, yeah.
So when you look at the double slit experiment, particles that and I can't remember which one it is, but a particle goes through. A particle goes through, if it's observed, it goes through one slit. If it's not observed, it goes through two slits in a way, but only if it's observed.
Yeah.
So some bright spark in the US gaming industry has said, oh, that's almost exactly like how we code our 3D worlds.
Yeah.
So if you think about you're looking in front of you, then you need as much information as possible. But you can see what's going on behind me, but you can't see what's going on behind you. So what's the point of rendering what's behind you? Because it's not being observed.
Yeah.
And that in some way is represented by the double slit experiment. So that's how coders code games. So does that mean possibly that there might be a simulation saving memory somewhere by not rendering for me the information behind me and just allowing me to have that rendered in front of me because that's what I'm observing? You see what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. I've watched a few podcasts with, I think it's Riz, I can't remember his surname. He talks a lot about the simulation hypothesis, and it's hard to sort of argue against it in some respects. And all of these theories and whatever, they all make sense, and there is some way that they could be coherent. It's just a different angle. So like a creation of God or simulation, they all talk about creation in some respects. So I think there is similarities, but also it's the stance that you have as an individual of how you observe that as to determining what the way that it works is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but to do that, you have to have had an education in critical thinking and questioning rather than come to it yourself. Otherwise, you will just take it as rote.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the reason it is. Oh, okay, fine. I'll move on with my life because it's easier. We talk quickly about these fractures. I was very lucky enough to see Stephen Hawking at the Barbican before he died, and I actually emailed in a question. This is years ago. I took my dad to see him because for some reason my dad and I bonded over particle physics, like the Higgs boson. And again, I'm only I had pop interest in it. I'm not a deep physicist academic. And I emailed in this question. I said, is it possible that the Big Bang came from a gigantic singularity, from a supermassive black hole that was created by sweeping up all the black holes in a previous universe? Because we now know, I've done some work with gravitational waves, saying I'm not into physics, done some work with gravitational waves, we know that they're formed when two black holes collide and form a supermassive black hole. So if there's a black hole hoovering up local area stuff, is it possible that over eons that it could hoover up everything? The singularity is so great, it has the physics to punch through to a next dimension or to a next universe, if you believe in the multi-universe, many universe theory. And I posed that to Stephen Hawking, which is quite a good story. Do you know what he said?
What did you say?
No. Who did
Most of the things, a stupid question, as you said. But I also,
I agree, but I did read somewhere fairly recently that they were exploring that kind of idea again. But no, that was the biggest letdown. I couldn't believe it when they read out the question in the Barbican, because we were all in the audience, and no, that's not possible.
but it's not. Well, it might be, because it's all fallibilism, isn't it? Where, at one point we thought the atom, which basically comes from the word atomus, uncuttable, and then we cut the atom, etc. So we the thing is, I think that's what a human issue psychologically is. We always think we're right now. Oh, do you know what? That was wrong, but we are definitely right this time. But didn't you say that 6 years ago when you said that? And I think that that's where I sit with things is, you know what? Yes. Okay, let me just assume it's true, but there is a chance it might not be. And I think you wrote in the book something about, and it's true, it's about learning, forgetting and relearning. And I think that's going to be the case, especially with the speed things are changing out. I think 50% of things that you learn at school are now no longer true, which is a lot.
To me, it's a lot more. Like,
Yeah, probably 7%.
Because I'm that much older. Yeah, I mean, my mind's going in a lot of different directions now, so I'll try and bring it back. So we were talking about AI earlier and the impact it has. Within the last few months, AI has found rivulets on Mars that weren't seen before. I think that's an amazing thing. I think it also uncovered a, not Shakespearean play, but a very famous poet's play that was attributed to someone else, and it discovered that it wasn't. It was actually this poet. So things like that, quite interesting. But I think the big use of AI that I've seen for a long time working well is like in spotting early diagnosis cancer and mammograms. That was quite a big one when I was working in a particular company looking at very early stage AI 15 years ago. So, the benefits outweigh it by some big margin. So that's really the fracture side of things. So if we go back to the equation quickly, you've got that TMSC across the top, the engine, the drivers we have control over, the capability, the culture, the moral, the technology, the ability to use technology, creativity and culture. And then you've got the denominators of, and they're multipliers, they multiply by each other, because if you have the best technology in the world, but you don't give access to everyone, then, that's going to lower the score of the overall equation. So the denominators are added together, the existential crisis, I'm having an existential issues and the fractures. They're not multiplied together because they don't have that same relationship. So they are compounding. So if you have this problem with AI and also COVID happening at the same time, that's compounding. The last two items of governance and really desire, they are multipliers. And I think they're the two most important things, because without governance, without the rules in place, you're never going to be able to get all this off the ground. And because we're dealing with such a large amount of cultures and politics and people, governance can often be seen as dictatorial. And it's really important that governance is made up from all cultures, because culture breeds creativity. You can't just have one way. It's like the education system. You'll do it this way. You can't. You've got to have a multitude of people. It's so important. It's so brilliant that we have that. That gives our humanity its humanity. So the governance is really important. But how do you govern? Who do you choose to govern? What ethics do you put in place? Those kind of things. And then I said before, desire. I almost weep for the world sometimes, because I just want everyone to believe that it can be such an amazing place. And it is an amazing place. But all the terrible things that happen in the news, I actually switched the news off for a while, which I don't normally do because it was really getting to me. Everyone wants to be successful in their life. That means different things to different people. For some people, it's financial. For some people, it's family. For some people, it's sports. As you get older, success is sitting at home on a Saturday night with a cup of tea with your feet up, knowing that everything is fine. No anxiety, no depression. Everything is fine. But I think intrinsically, the whole world wants the world to be a better place for everybody, because if it's better for everyone, it's better for you, it's better for your family, and so on. And I sometimes cannot believe that this ideology isn't propagated. And I put it down to control from the power hungry and greedy. And that makes me really sad. And if we continue down that road without the desire to want to do something, then that's going to suppress our advancement and take us down a path.
So the multipliers then, Governance first. What do you mean by governance?
So governance is the ability to have the required elements in place to make all of this happen. You're not going to just be able to stand up and say, right, every school in the world needs to teach critical thinking, for example, that we were just talking about. Now, we know that that is a pathway that is almost a must for the progression towards a successful society. What I believe is towards a successful society, give everyone the ability to question, come up with ideas, and be creative. But how do you filter that down without it seeming dictatorial, without it seeming like a political movement? So in the book, I talk about setting up um, a global network, if you like, of governance. There's no overarching uh, political instrument, if you like, but it is groups of representational people from all walks of life and cultures, and that filters down into different countries, into different regions, into different societies, into different villages, if you like. And it's a huge undertaking, and probably one of the biggest problems with the whole success of this blueprint. But it is fundamentally one of the most important, because if you don't have governance, if you don't have governance, how are you going to be persuasive? How are you going to communicate this to people? How are you going to steer them in the direction? Now, I'm hoping in the world where this does work, you don't have to steer people or persuade them so much, because the education system would have been changed whereby people come to their own conclusions and accept that actually we're all working together. But the governance has to be around open, transparent, honesty, communication, representation. So even as I'm saying this, it's starting to sound like a government quango or something, or a global government, and that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be purely representational and accountable in itself. And whether it's elected or however it's put together, it's not about popularity. It's about ability to contribute. And I speak about that quite a lot, the ability to contribute. So it's slightly off topic, but quite an interesting point is what happens when it's not 75% of jobs are taken by AI. It's not 90%. It's 100% of jobs, which I don't think will ever be the case, because even when the motorized car came out, people became wheelwright. The stagecoach owners, they became wheelwrights and blacksmiths and garage owners and fuel pump attendants and mechanics, and new skills were learned. We have to find those peripheral jobs for the next generation, But there is going to be an awful lot of free time. I think people are already seeing that now. I think we had a taste of that in COVID. There was an awful lot of kind of free time when people were on furlough. And how do you fill that free time? What do you do when there's no purpose? We need purpose as human beings to grow. And if the equation is at zero, if it's equated, that's almost worse than being negative, because we're not trying to do anything. We're just stagnating. And you want to keep growing. So purpose is really, really important. Now, in various countries around the world, they've been talking about universal basic income. So when people don't have jobs, they've been experimenting. In the UK, I think it was in the Northeast, they selected 30 families, give them £1,800 a month, non-means tested,
Yeah.
to see what they would do with that money. And the idea was that, if that works, then if there's no jobs, the idea was we tax the big tech companies who are making all the money anyway, or we allow people to make money from their own digital assets to advertise and so on. So instead of Facebook making money from my information, or Temu, because that's how Temu really works, then I get rewarded for that. That's also an income for me, and universal basic income. So you can imagine a scenario where people are no longer working, they've got all this free time, they have an income. Hopefully they're not giving it to investment advisors to set up Ponzi schemes. They keep that money, all that nice stuff. Sounds utopian, sounds a bit communistic, but they're testing it already in a number of countries. And specifically, they've done it in the UK. So what do you do with your free time? So they're saying things like sports and entertainment, creativity are going to flourish. People are going to become more intellectually curious. But we still will lack that purpose. And people need purpose in their lives. Ikigagi in Japan is the word they have for purpose. And a CEO who's at the top of their company is as revered as the street cleaner, whose purpose it is, whose passion it is to keep the streets clean, because that's what he's chosen his passion is. So they call that ikigagi. So what happens to the next couple of generations who've been sold this education system that's going to get them these jobs, and all of a sudden they're not available and they've got all this free time. That could be anarchy. It's not anarchy. What's the word? It could be anarchy. Let's put it that way. But governance needs to work on that and put the rules in place to satisfy, hopefully, everyone, but it never works like that, the majority, so that we can move past it into this next stage.
I think
of the timeline.
I think it's very different though, this stage, because yes, you've got the slow build up of, the change from horse and cart to cars, etc. This could be a whole mass all at once. AI becomes that powerful where, you know, there's a number of jobs that go all together, and then yes, universal basic income becomes a sort of inevitability. And yes, it could allow us to have more free time and purpose and all these sorts of things. But I think the issue is about skills being lost. It's like we've forgotten how to build the pyramid, for example. Skills do get lost. And if you become dependent on stuff like the calculator, pre-calculator, I could probably guess that most people could do mental maths pretty easily. But as you become reliant on it, because humans are lazy by nature, we try and find easy ways to do things, whether it's AI or, cleaning up, or we design things to make things easier, which is a good thing, of course, but it can have its detrimental impacts, I think, on society as well. Because yes, it could be great for 3 or 4 generations, but on the 5th one, let's say the meteor does strike and it strikes the epicenter of the technology that we use to run things, we're then back to sticks and stones.
Well, but that's part of governance as well. You mean you have to have redundancy built into the system. You have to, that can't happen. If we decide that's the way forward and that's how we're going, and that technology is useful to us, we can't just have it in one place. We've got to have it all over the place, either on planet or off planet. Or and by off planet, I don't mean Mars particularly, but I mean it could be, but
circling
satellites. There has to be redundancy built into the system for that. I don't. So in the book, I reference universal basic income, but I call it a personal contribution payment because of this idea of purpose. You should still be free to explore the things that you enjoy and are going to give back to society. And so you have to, it sounds so dictatorial again, but you should want to have a purpose that does give back. And that might be in your local community, or it might be going back to university to learn something else, to cross-pollinate ideas that might solve a particular problem. So there's an element of contribution. Everyone is contributing to the purposefulness of society to ensure the longevity of humanity. So that's part of governance as well. Is making sure that everybody is looked after, and referencing the ability to use the technology is the A, or access. Then everybody's brought up at the same time to the same level. Now, we're so fragmented at the moment that that's got to be solved first. And government has this is why it sounds dictatorial, because government will have a hard time over the next 3-5 generations doing that. But if we get that layer right and bring everyone up at the same time so that everyone benefits, then I think that is the biggest problem solved. And that's really what governance is all about, is ensuring that happens so we can go the rest of the way.
So having a safety net to ensure that the demise of, or the base level of humans is covered, to allow for a level of creativity and self-discovery and purpose themselves, while the major things are covered through big corporate companies that sort of run everything now through AI. Because if AI does take a lot of jobs, that's the only way it's going to go, I think.
I can't see an alternative, because remember we said, humanity has never really put the brakes on. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, but we never really put the brakes on because we're adventurous. We like to see what's on the other side of the wall. We like to see if we can do something. Even as kids, can I climb that tree and not fall out? I did fall out once, but or can I break the 10-second 100-meter barrier? Can I break the 9-second 100-meter barrier? As soon as Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, everyone broke the 4-minute mile because it could be done. So AGI we're heading towards because it can be done, and because the prize financially is actually really big. But I'd like to switch it from financially to culturally and civilizationally.
But does that then create the desire for unity, which is the last part? All of these things that could go wrong and may go wrong and are foreseen to possibly go wrong creates that desire for unity.
How does unity manifest? Unity manifests by commonality and communication. Families tend to stay together, the loving family, the extended family over for dinner, because they trust each other, because they're family, because they ride out the good and the bad, because they solve problems quickly. Unity with 8 billion plus people on the planet is a really difficult thing to find. Goes back to tribalism again. How do we move past that? How do we transcend the fantastic cultures and religions and influences and arts that we have, and the contrasting views of our place in the universe, to this solidified view that if we don't, then we're not going to exist. I keep coming back to that. We are just not going to exist. Too many things are going to go wrong. And when I say exist, you said if the meteor hits and we go back to the Dark Ages, if an EMP comes from a solar flare, if a solar flare goes off and knocks out all our satellite communications or electronics, we go back to the Dark Ages, whatever that means, and we'll thrive again. But ultimately, if we believe that we're at a point in civilization that we would like to grow from, then we have to come together. So I had this idea. That with the book, that I would do a different cover for each premier in each country. So Xi Jinping, Trump, Putin, Starmer, everybody. I would do a different front cover. And in the back of the book, there's a manifesto. It's a plea, really, to all the nations of the world and all the leaders of the world to come together and unite around the book. And I was going to do a different cover for each book, and I was going to send them out individually, because brilliantly on Amazon you can do that. It doesn't take too much. It's not too difficult. And I still might do that in the vain hope that someone in their governments will read this and it might spark something. And that's the reason I'm doing this as well with you, not least because it's absolutely fascinating and interesting, and you're a great host, so thank you very much. But also because, when I've discussed this with friends, they look at me like, oh, you know what? You're never going to make this happen. It's utopian. It's too difficult. But like everyone, I want to see over the wall. Tell me it's hard. That will make me do it more. And I kind of live my life a little bit like that. When people said I couldn't do something, I go out of my way to do it.
It's the black sheep, isn't it? It's the whole, people tend to look down on the black sheep, like you're different, you're not conforming to the ideas and beliefs that we have, but the black sheep are the ones that change the world.
Possibly. I'm not saying I'm a world changer, but at least I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah.
There's I'll send it to you, but there's a brilliant YouTube clip that I've used in my past life with teams that I've managed in the technology industry. And it's a guy who gets up, he's a crazy dancer it's not Woodstock, but it's something like Woodstock or Glastonbury, and he's dancing by himself and people are jeering him, telling him to sit down. He's in this field. And he is the important one, but he's not the most important. The most important is the second person that joins him. So the second person joins him and dances with him. And because the second person has joined this dancer, everyone's like, oh, someone else thinks it's an interesting thing to do. And then third, fourth, fifth come along. And then within 5 minutes, there are thousands of people dancing. And this guy started from absolutely nothing. So the point is, look at the crazy people doing the crazy things and try and understand why. And if there's any spark, then go and join them, or go, at least have an interest to question them. That's going joining them and see what it's about, because everything is interesting, I've learned.
It's like Robert Greene says, if you're on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. I think that's in his 48 Laws of Power. If everyone's doing one thing, maybe they're doing it wrong, because most people are idiots as it happens. Unfortunately, that's the way it is.
Not your listeners, though, no?
No, well, some of them maybe, but maybe all of you, I don't know, because you listen to it, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, most people don't think differently. They are the sheep. Not everyone can
Because
be
we like to
that.
conform. We don't like to stand out from the crowd because it makes us different. We want to conform. We want to be part of the group. It happens in our formative years, in our teenage years, mostly, because that's the time when, I'm not an educationalist. I'm not an expert on it. I have been a teenager and I've had 3 teenage boys, but that's the time when you want to conform. You don't want to be different, and you find your place in a group. It's not when you find your place in the world, that comes later, but it's when you find your place in a group. And I think that the people who start branching out then are like the weird. It's Ferris Bueller does it beautifully. The film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Oh my God, you have to watch that. It's one of my favorite films. But he's this guy who transcends every culture at like an 80s, 90s high school. You've got the dweebs, the drug heads, you've got the motorheads, you've got the heavy metal guys, you've got the geeks, but they all love Ferris because he kind of transcends it all, because he's not in any of those little groups. And that's why I love that film, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because he doesn't care about the strangeness of other people. He'll just be friends with everybody. Never seen
No,
that
I've never
film.
seen it, no.
Oh my God, it's such a good film.
The conformity is a weird thing. It's the whole Ash study when they drew lines on. Have you seen the Ash conformity study?
Not sure. Keep going.
They drew lines on a blackboard or whiteboard. Two were the same and one was different, and they asked which ones are the
Yeah,
same.
these are people sitting in a row, aren't they?
Yeah.
And everyone knew apart from one person.
And people conform to stupid ideas.
You know the Milgram experiment?
Yeah, the obedience one with the electrocuting.
Yeah, essentially they faked
Obedience.
someone being so obedient they would actually kill someone.
Yeah.
And they proved what happened the things that happened in Vietnam and Germany at the time during those horrendous periods of history. It proved that people would conform to authoritarian kind of instruction because they thought it was the right thing to do.
But it goes even further than that with the monkey study even. The when the monkey was going up the ladder to get the banana,
yeah.
but they taught, and then in the end, there was no monkey left in the group that was in the original, but they all did the same action. They kept swapping out the monkeys, and it just shows that if you conform to an idea that may be wrong, it can pass on indefinitely, which is what I think a lot of people do.
But that's the critical thinking piece, right?
This is it.
That's why it needs to be ingrained. Critical thinking and creativity, cross pollination of ideas. In a way, I think in culture, the show and tell attitude of the US that they've had for so many years is actually really beneficial because even from an early age, you do show and tell. Very few schools do that. And I think they're doing it more now in the UK. But the ability to stand up in a group of people and put your point across is such a fundamental skill. And to have the confidence to do that should be bred early, And I don't think maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we weren't doing that in our education system.
But it's like you said about imposter syndrome and fear of judgment and fear of failure. All of those things sort of come to one where people are more scared of speaking publicly than death.
Yeah, I think that's a statistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I definitely used to be like that. I definitely used to hate public speaking. But if people are willing to listen, I'm willing to stand up there and talk.
It is difficult though, actually, when there's people in the room. If there was a whole crowd, it does get nerve-wracking to do that. But
So I find the most nerve-wracked I've ever been is with a small group of friends who came to watch me do a talk. So I used to have a soft drinks business years ago, and I wrote a couple of books about starting businesses about 2009. Wrote a couple of books then. And they came to see me speak, and I just couldn't get my words out because it mattered what they thought. It really mattered what they thought. But you put me in front of 2,000 people, I just stand up there and just tell them what I'm telling them, take some questions, and ad lib on stage. I love that.
I know what you mean. It's the closeness that affects it, that they know you and they are probably more likely to judge you unfavorably than the strangers.
So a friend of mine over Christmas told me a story. I won't mention the play, but it's in the West End. His daughter's just scored a really premium role. She's only young, and she's got this West End debut, and she's now famous. And he went down to see her for Christmas. They spent Christmas down with her, and he said, I was out there and I saw her, she's signing autographs. And I was thinking, what are you doing? Stop doing that. What are you signing autographs for? But he's actually really famous now. And it's that perception of a parent or a friend. So I've known people since I was 4 years old. I'm lucky enough to have kept in contact with a good core set of friends. And and they're like, you do quantum what? But at school you would, your maths was through the floor. What do you mean you're doing quantum computing now and all this kind of stuff? It's so funny to see friends and well, not family so much because they see the journey, but friends who you see fairly sporadically, and you end up in a certain place and they still equate it with when they knew you. How can you possibly be doing that? I find that hysterical personally.
It is hysterical because, like you say, they can only have the last updated version of you in their mind. Okay, I knew him at 6 and he used to, I don't know, piss his pants or whatever it might be. And now he's...
Let's be clear, we're not talking about me.
Yeah. And now he's a CEO of some business. But it's like, oh, I always remember him as the guy who was remembered for weeing his pants or whatever. And but that's the last update they had in their mind. And now they have to re-update the software to say, actually, do you know what? Okay, he went through that. Now he's smashing it. And I work at a supermarket stacking shelves, People change, people develop. And you can even go through bad periods of your life and still come out on the other side, or go through good spells and actually you lose in the end. It can happen. And there's hundreds of stories of that. Talking about playing stuff out, how do you see the next 50, 100,000 years play out for humanity based on this crossroads that we're at right now, which you've said? How does that timeline look for you?
So in the book, I kind of separate out into a few timelines. So the next 50 to 100, the next 100 to 1,000, the next 1,000 and beyond kind of years. I keep saying civilization will be gone in 1,000 years if we don't do anything about it now. That's my line in the sand, right? There has been work done around it, but hopefully we're going to survive so we can go to that 10,000 year period. The end game, the first point is to get to a type 1 civilization. If we can align on that purpose around this equation or the ideas that the equation represents, then, excuse me, then that's going to allow us to achieve a type 1 civilization, according to Kardashev, is harnessing all the power sustainably from our planet, which will allow us to bring everyone up a level to have the technology and use it hopefully in the right way. But it's also going to be the most dangerous point, because what I'm essentially saying is that we're the curators for the rest of humanity, and the inflection point really is now. We can keep bumbling along and solving problems and having governments in for just 4 years who overturn the last government and then seek to be the next government. We can live our 100, perhaps 120, 130 years. I was in a meeting 20 years ago, very privileged meeting, that told me if I lived to 60, which is only 4 years' time, then I'll live to 130. It was a big pharmaceutical closed meeting. I was quite privileged to be in that, actually. So, we'll live longer, but we started by saying 100 years, is that long enough for us to learn everything, understand everything, and move forward as a humanity with that lifespan? My view of death is it's a necessary thing.
I think so.
It's a necessary thing. It tends to focus the mind somewhat. They say that man lives twice.
Yeah.
Once when you realize you're going to die, and then
Yeah.
or dies twice. Once you realize you're going to live twice, then you die. And I think I'm at that phase. I've realized I'm going to die. Hence,
The second life begins when you realise you only have one, I think.
Yeah.
Is the saying.
I'm often misquoting things. That's why I wish I had the book, because it's in there. So yeah, I think I'm at that stage now, and it's focused me. It's focused me absolutely on my own life, but also to want to share some things, just not for me, but for my legacy too. So the next 50 to 100 years is going to be really difficult, made more difficult in the last year and a half. Sorry, in the last 5 years, 6, 7 years, however long it's been in president. But geopolitically, I think we've gone back in time. Ever since Brexit, we've gone back in time. Brexit unified Europe. The next step was to unify the region and then the world, and we could all start talking about this more sensibly. So I think it's going to be really dynamic and really difficult. I think people are still fractured and fractious. I think we are not far from a big war, and I think it's by old, outdated, mostly men who are power hungry and greedy. I think I've said that enough. No more politics. So after that, if we can survive that and not just bumble along, but get on a proper trajectory, then from 100 to 1,000 years, we need to get on with that push towards finalizing a type 1 civilization, what that means, and a reintroduction of a new structure of then what? Because we'll have to change the way we look at society in terms of population. We'll have to change the way we look at where people live on or off planet. I am certain that in 125, 150 years, that there will be people living in space. There'll be hotels in space. There'll be space travel agents. We've already seen that working. I love these big ideas.
Same.
But then if someone's born on a satellite, are they an Earthling? Then you've got to contend with that. If they're born on Mars, are they a Martian? Or it's going to be quite difficult to contend with that. So there's going to be a whole lot of moral stuff. Creatively, I think we're going to explode because of AI, right? Because you can now, and I'm a product of that, because you can research a wide variety of topics and cross-pollinate those ideas into things a lot faster. The KPMG, PwCs, large organizations, consulting organizations, they used to do rotational development, whereby you'd graduate in criminal psychology, and then you'd go into finance for 6 months, and sales for 6 months, and marketing for 6 months, in the hope that you'd say, while I was in finance, I saw that as part of my criminology degree, that when you forensically look at this and then go into sales, that perhaps we should try a new process. So a lot of innovation entrepreneurship is based around cross-pollination of ideas, which makes us unique up until today-ish, because only we have the experiences, the life skills, our own interpretation of the world and education to have eyes to see things other people can't. And that's I've gone a little bit off track to another book now, but that's a little bit what I believe entrepreneurship is about. It's about seeing opportunities that other people can't because of your experiences. That makes us unique and gives everyone that opportunity. The advent of AI means that you can cross-pollinate a vast amount of information and find much more opportunity very quickly, which allowed me to write the book. And I've made no bones about that. I would never have been able to do the research I've done without AI as quickly as I've been able to do it across so many subject areas. So when used correctly, that creativity is going to go through the roof. People are going to be finding connections. They're going to solve problems. And, there is a financial aspect to that. Which problems do we solve first? Which problems are going to make money to help the next iteration? And by that, I mean, I'm jumping around a bit now, so bring it back if you need to. But you look at quantum computers now, and the economic model for quantum computers is every now and then one of the top 5, 6 quantum computer companies like IonQ or Rigetti or D-Wave or IBM, Microsoft, will sell a quantum computer to a government or a company. We're all over the press. We've sold another quantum computer, $20 to $40 million, whatever it is. But that isn't a sustainable economic model to drive the research necessary to get to a fault-tolerant quantum computer. What you need is, and D-Wave are the only company doing it at the moment, what you need is like the email of quantum computers, like that killer app. And for D-Wave's particular modality, it's optimization. So optimization problems are traveling salesmen, how to get from A to B to C to D more efficiently. It might be an aircraft, might be a parcel, might be a person. Or the knapsack problem. I've got 2 lorries. How do I put all those packages in the lorry in a 3D, XYZ architecture to get them to the right place? And most optimization problems are based on those two, I would say. But what that means is they use quantum cloud as a service to allow people to run those problems on quantum computers, and they charge to do that. That's more recurring revenue than saying, oh, this year we sold one quantum computer for 10 million. So the economics needs to change. But the problem with quantum computers is to do that calculation, you need a classical computer to orchestrate all the data. You send it to the quantum chip. It does the answer in a temperature colder than the average temperature of space, which always blows my mind on semiconductor quantum computers, and then puts the information back in milliseconds. So the time you spent on that quantum computer is milliseconds. How much are you going to pay to use that quantum computer's time if it's milliseconds? So you have to sell solutions. You have to sell an optimization solution. Anyway, I went a bit down a rabbit hole there. The point is the economics doesn't work. So if we're going to choose technologies to go with, because we can, we've got to make sure the economics works as well. That's what I was trying to get to there. That was just one example.
Okay. Assuming the economics does work and we can improve technology vastly, and we fast forward 100, 500 years, and we are then not just living in hotels in space, but we are multi-planetary species because everything's gone okay. We've worked together. We've now evolved and adapted. Is there a point though? So let's just caveat something. If we look at the exponential growth of development over recent years compared to the slower progress in the past, everything's getting better, much, much faster, and it will continue to do so. And let's say we do get to space and we then go on to different planets. Could there be a point that, especially with the relativity from Einstein, we become different species because of the time difference? So 1 year on Earth might be 20 years somewhere else, and we can evolve even faster relative to the Earth time.
Yes. I mean, we're talking about, it's not really science fiction because we know the physics involved, but, that's way into the future. But yeah, there's a distinct possibility that could happen. I, I don't want to get too sci-fi, but is there a possibility that's already happened and we are the species that was left behind and the alien race is coming back and they're actually our forebears who just he split away from, and because of relativity, they evolved at a different rate to us. I mean, that's a possibility too. And I love exploring those ideas, but you don't know. I think I like to think in hops, right? And the first hop is who is going to be the first child born, who's going to have that terrible infamy of the first child born in space or the first Martian to be born. Someone's going to have it. I actually had a bet on, it was a side bet with friends years ago on holiday, and I said my grandchild will be the first child to step on Mars. Not going to happen now. Yeah. But they've already highlighted the girl who's going to do it, actually. She was picked about the age of 10 or 11, and they've been honing her and through not flight school, but through the first flight path to get to Mars. I think she's already been chosen. But the point is, yeah, I think there are hops to get there. And we'd be dealing too much in sci-fi if we thought we could get there. But in 50,000 years, do I think we're going to be here anyway? And does it all matter? I actually don't. I think too much will happen in 50,000 years that we have no control over, from the E and the F and the existential crisis and the fractures that are just going to kill us out. But I'd love to get us through the next 1,000 years.
Yeah, I think that even whether it's 1,000 or whatever, is that it's whether we can upload consciousness to robots, which is a big question for me, because if that's the case, who determines whether or not that's done to who, if that makes sense? Because if we can do it, it will probably be the wealthy that do that in order to maintain control for forever, in which case the chance of cooperation and unity diminishes.
So let's take that one bit at a time. The first bit is uploading a consciousness to a computer. Our brains are electrical circuits that are burned, our memories are burned in there. Why isn't there some ability to 3D plot those pathways and transpose them onto some kind of computer, quantum computer, whatever, commercial computer chip, to allow us to not be immortal, but to have a copy, because that's what it would be. It would be a copy, soulless, whatever you want to call a soul, copy of ourselves on a computer. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility at all. I think that it is the realm of sci-fi, but I think that's not out of the realms of possibility. I think that could be done. Like anything, our current capitalistic model is one of financial gain. And you just look at the current trend in weight loss drugs. What are they, £200 a month? Something like that?
Ozempic?
Well, Ozempic, Manjaro,
Yeah,
whatever they are.
yeah.
And then, who's going to be able to afford £200 a month? You can't get on the NHS, you have to pay for it. So it's going to be the wealthy who can afford to look young, be young. Is it a step towards living longer, possibly, because they're healthier? So in that representation, there is money that's driving that, allowing people to look, feel, be younger and healthier, unless they take it too far. So the hop from that would be, it would be the wealthy that would drive the finances behind uploading. But it hasn't happened with AI. Everyone, it's pervasive. Everyone's got access to AI. It's not the preserve. Now, there are, I pay for ChatGPT, $20 a month, I think it is. There is a $250 version, is there, for academics? So there is a capability there that money is buying. Does it make it better? Possibly.
I mean, my friend used to do the same. He paid for it, I think, for a little while, but he said because of the use he was, or the type of thing he was using it for, it didn't make much sense, and it wasn't actually giving him net benefit. But different horses for different courses, or the other way around. Depending on what you're doing, it might be worth paying that saves you the time, saves you the resources. It's the whole example of paying a gardener to do your garden. If you're making more money and using that time more wisely, it makes sense. If you're not, then it makes sense to do it yourself. It's
I don't like
that
gardening.
trade-off.
I don't like gardening.
That you can put that into the equation as well, I suppose, if you enjoy it or not. 'Cause some people do.
It's the D of desire, isn't it? I don't desire to do gardening, and I see value of my time elsewhere. So I do pay someone once every 2 weeks to come along and do the stuff. I just had another thought then. It's gone. It was carry on. It'll come back.
Well, if you'd uploaded it to the robot,
Yeah,
you would have
yeah.
remembered it.
No, it was about AI. Anyway, come on, let's carry on because that's completely gone out of my head.
So what do you think the next steps are over the next 12 months for people? If assuming that, your ideas are correct in terms of what we need to do to ensure we ascend rather than descend.
So, I was toying with this over Christmas. What do I want from this? The reason I wrote the book is because I wrote it for me. I wanted to be able to answer big questions and be credible enough to be part of conversations like this. And that's why I did the research, and research led me to doing all this. I'd like people to read the book. I would like to create a forum or be part of a forum that had open discussion about elements in the book or ways to augment it, or if the equation's the right thing or not. Let's put it out there and strip it down and build something new. I'd just like to get people talking about it, that there is a possible better future. Because I just don't like the way the world's going. And I've got children who hopefully, well, maybe, who knows, may have children who have children who have children. In 200 years, no one will remember me. Hoping they might do it.
Maybe with the book,
Maybe.
second death and all that.
So, that's what I'd like. And I thought of putting those forums together and maybe doing it once a week or something, giving people an opportunity to put their views across, because I'm a firm believer in communication and discourse. I think it's the most important thing. We have to share ideas. People don't speak enough.
I think, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because especially with people not going out to the pubs as much anymore, things are getting very expensive. People work from home, they're not maybe conversing with people as much as they should do. And those environments are where ideas get shared. And especially even if we did go to the office with the corporate side, where you're not allowed to speak about certain things, there's not a chance for open discussion. And yes, forums I think is a good idea, but as we're talking now, it's much better us actually talking than messaging back and forth. And yes, messaging back and forth is great. We can still
Well, I
share.
didn't, did I, for a week? I kind of went cold on you over Christmas, so
Well,
sorry about that.
no, it's okay. Busy time of year. It just allowed probably more time for me to sort of absorb your ideas. But I think that's a big crucial difference is that we can't just rely on reading and writing things. We also have to converse and discuss because, as you said, a lot of communication is not just well, it's non-verbal, isn't it? And it's a way to create ideas, and people are much more eloquent really in talking than writing. I know you're going to argue the point is you can go back and refine it, but what I mean is it's the charisma that's involved with saying something as opposed to writing it that allows for more ideas to be exchanged, assuming someone actually delivers the points they're trying to make in a good way and also actually say what they really think. I think that's a big drawback is especially now with freedom of speech, people don't really want they don't know what to say. It loses their ability to think because then they stop thinking that way, which is a bad thing. It's like Jordan Peterson said, um, my ability to offend you should trump your ability to tell me what to think.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Have you come across a Lindau meeting? Do you know what a Lindau meeting is?
Lindaw.
Lindau. So I came across it quite recently. I was actually looking for a present for someone who's a physicist friend of mine. And I was just kind of searching around online, eBay and stuff. And I found this other auction site. And I was actually searching for something to do with the Nobel Prizes. And actually, Peter Higgs's estate went up for sale over Christmas. He who discovered the Higgs boson. And they put up his Dirac medal, his Rutherford medal. And I thought, wow, I'll buy him this because that is a unique thing, a medal that was given to Peter Higgs on the discovery of the Higgs boson. And anyway, I got outbid by absolutely, it went for thousands. So not, too difficult. But I did find this Lindau medal, and it's it's bronze medal about 12.5 inches in diameter. And a Lindau meeting is a collection every 5 years of Nobel Prize winners that are invited to speak to young up-and-coming
Okay.
physicists, chemists, literary people, peacemakers, and so on. So you get a collection on this island of Lindau, somewhere in Germany, in a lake in Germany, Lake Lindau, of course, on this island, and they meet and they share ideas very openly. And so I bought this Lindau medal. And I've sent it to him with a book and a little bit of a certificate saying what it is and why it is and why it means so much to me. And the reason it means so much to me and this friendship I have with this guy is because he's a physicist. I'm very much a commercial person, go-to-market person. I understand technology and hopefully how technology benefits the world. But there's a fantastic quote on the back in it. But basically, I'm going to completely misquote it because I haven't got it in front of me. But it's by one of the Nobel Prize winners who attended the Lindau meeting that the medal was presented at. And he was responsible for two fundamental properties of superconducting physics. I want to say his name is John Bessemer, something like that. So please forgive me, internet. But he says something misquoted along the lines of, everyone can have an idea and take it to and have the opportunity to take it to fruition, but it takes a team of scientists and people to actually make it effective. That's a complete misquote. But because I've been working with him on the more commercialization of his technology, and he's the physicist, PhD, who came up with it, it worked quite well. So as a present, it was good. What I'm telling you that story is that I came across these Lindau meetings, and that's speaking exactly what you're talking about, is that you need that open forum. Nobel Prize winners who understand and transcend the problems of the world for their particular focus, their contribution to the world. And they're willing to share that idea of contribution means more than perhaps earning from it, with the next upcoming set of scientists and academics between the ages of 18 and 28, I think they are. I think that's fascinating. I only came across that just before Christmas.
I mean, it's one of the reasons that I started this podcast and have great guests on like yourself because we discuss ideas, we put ideas out into the ether. Maybe we agree on some things, maybe we disagree, but that's the beauty of discussion as opposed to just listening to ideas. You can really get to the core of things and allow arguments to go back and forth, or steel manning an argument or whatever it may be. So, yeah, I mean, it's been awesome.
Thanks.
And
Really
thanks very
enjoyed
much
it.
for coming on the show.
No, I've really enjoyed it. I don't think, personally, I don't have a huge amount of opportunity to have a conversation with someone as insightful as yourself. And, honestly, I'm not just saying that because we're sitting across each other at a table.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic opportunity for me to get some of my ideas across. It's honed some of my thinking. It's giving me some new ideas. So, no, a massive thank you for inviting me on. It's been brilliant.
Thanks very much. And I know you said that you went quiet for a bit over Christmas, but when you did actually send the book, but obviously read it over the last few days, and it was actually a lot more interesting than I had. Because I mean, as with anything, you think, okay, what's this going to be like? And I think that's a human thought, isn't it? Unless you've got like Harry Potter, for example, when everyone tells you you've got to read it as a kid, and you've got all of this sort of social. We talked about Robert Cialdini's social credit, if
Social
you like,
proof, yeah.
proof. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, yeah, social proof. Then it's already there. Whereas if it's something new, it's like, okay, cool. What's this going to be? How's this going to be? And awesome,
Thank
really,
you.
really good piece
Appreciate
of
it.
work. So yeah, thanks again.